Media recognition from Bloomberg, Reuters, recycling trade publications. Patented process for 100% recovery of critical metals, including cobalt, lithium, nickel, manganese, aluminum. American Manganese is focused on recycling lithium-ion batteries for electric vehicles. American Manganese trades on the TSX Venture, AMY, the US, AMYZF, and Frankfurt 2AM. For more information, visit AmericanManganeseInc.com or phone me, Larry Ray, at 778-574-4444.
Welcome to the Goddard Report. Comments made on the Goddard Report and TalkDigitalNetwork.com are an expression of opinion only. Here is Jim Goddard.
My guest is Kris Sims, BC Director of the Canadian Taxpayers Federation, her website taxpayer.com. Welcome back to the show, Kris.
Thank you so much.
Kris, you've been crunching some numbers concerning carbon taxes on your home fuel bills. It doesn't sound very encouraging. It could be the winter of our discontent and frozen butts.
Yes, it really can be. I think people sometimes need a reminder, especially in other parts of Canada, that we are in Canada and this is winter time. And in order to not freeze to death or have your pipes burst, you need to keep your home heated. And so I was doing a talk show a couple of weeks ago on television, and it was a debate on the carbon tax. And one of the gentlemen who helped write the legislation for the federal carbon tax was on there with us. And he actually described the federal carbon tax as, quote, punishment of poor behavior for using fossil fuels, end quote. So that comes as a surprise to many Canadians who use oil and gas to, other than get to work, to heat their homes. We use stuff like natural gas, furnace oil, and propane. And all of those, of course, carry a carbon tax. And so I was really curious as to how much fuel people were using to not freeze. And so I put out the call to our supporters and said, hey, everybody, send me your heating bills. I want to look at, how many liters or cubic meters you're using, and then I'll do the math and I'll write an article about it. Well, I brought this on myself. I must have over 1,000 emails. I'm not kidding, with people's heating bills. And so it was really overwhelming and sometimes upsetting to actually read. I was hearing from a senior, her name's Jane. She actually said that she's already wrapping herself in blankets, like in her home, because she's on a fixed income and she finds it difficult to pay. It was only about $40 extra a month she was paying in the carbon tax right now. And so what's going to happen in 2030 is the federal carbon tax is going up to $170 a ton. That's about a 460% increase in 9 years. So that's a big skyrocketing tax. So I did the math, and within the next 9 years, by the year 2030, natural gas is going to have a federal carbon tax of 33 cents per cubic meter. Propane will have a federal carbon tax of 26 cents a liter, and furnace oil is going to have a 46 cent per liter carbon tax. And for listeners here in BC, we're backstopped. So we can't go lower than the federal carbon tax. So when Trudeau makes an announcement like this, we're being pulled up his cliff with him. So folks really need to brace themselves. I'll give you an example. Another family from Black Diamond, Alberta, sent me their natural gas bill, and it wasn't even the highest one, but it was up there. And their natural gas bill carbon tax for 1 month, December to January, was more than $70 right now. So it was pretty high, but not the highest. I did the calculation, Jim. This time, like this bill in 9 years, is going to be $390 just in the carbon tax, not including GST or the fuel. So folks had better buckle up.
So when people start freezing in their homes, is there any way to get around this, or do you think? I think to heat your home, there's no alternative. It's not like you can take public transit. For some other people in rural areas, especially, you have no alternative but to use propane. You're not even hooked up to the natural gas line.
Yeah, exactly. And this is where it's alarming. I was hearing from people, you remember, of course, propane. You're right, in rural areas, sometimes propane is the only thing they can use. And, for most people, they're only familiar with propane for those little 20-pound tanks, they're called, that go underneath barbecues. But if you look carefully at some of the folks who are coming into town from the country, they'll often have these big tanks strapped into their pickup trucks because they're taking them home. Those are 200-pound tanks. They use those to heat their homes. And so sometimes farmhouses use them. And then, and this is really critical, most mobile home parks, trailer parks, use propane for their fuel. And there are even some folks, increasingly more now in British Columbia on the coast, that live in their RVs year-round because that's all they can afford, and they've downsized. They use propane too. So those are folks who can least afford it. And I did the math there too. So the average user, I called one of the biggest distributors in Canada and said, about, ballpark, how much does the average person use? And it's 2,500 liters. So that's going to cost that person about $680 more per year in the carbon tax by 2030. And that may feel like a long ways away, but it's not. 9 years is going to go by in a blink. And so people really need to be aware of this. They need to phone their MP. They need to tell them that they can't pay carbon taxes on something as essential as home heating. And I think it's just an oversight. I think the federal government and in some ways the provincial governments as well have not realized that this is not simply a luxury you can opt out of. This is not, the difference between paper or plastic shopping bags. This is between heating or not. So folks really need to clue in here. And on the issue of rebates, because I hear people bring this up, while it's true that some provinces do get federal forms of rebates right now, some people say it's covering their costs so far. Others tell us that it's not anywhere near covering their carbon tax bill for their costs. I want to remind people that British Columbia is the template. We're being used as the example for the federal carbon tax. They fashioned it after us. And if we're being used as an example, here in BC, your rebate evaporates completely by the time your two-person working family hits $59,000 per year. The average two-person working family couple earns $84,000 per year. So the BC rebate on the carbon tax means absolutely squat for the average working people here.
My family income is way below $59,000. I've never received a provincial rebate for carbon tax.
You haven't?
No, never.
You should. I'm dead serious. You should be if you're way below $59,000 as a two-person working income.
Ha!
If you haven't, you better get on the horn. No, you should be getting one in BC. It says so right on the website. If you're not, you need to phone them.
Well, there you go.
There you go. See?
See?
News you can use.
Well, you learn something new every day.
You do.
Well, because this is, Canada used to be listed as the coldest country in the world. Somebody got colder than us, but we're still the second coldest. And we had a very cold winter, temperatures down to minus 40. You have to turn up the thermostat whether you like it or not, even if you just want to save your home, because look at Texas where they didn't have power and everybody's water lines froze. So it's not that you're just cold. Your house ends up destroyed when the water comes back on.
Oh, for sure. And that's why I said, the luxury of staying alive and or not having your pipes burst, which is a very serious thing. It was terrible to see that happening in Texas. And so again, this is not some luxury. You can't just opt out of this. And for folks, who are big carbon tax cheerleaders, and they're typically, urban folks living in Toronto, will just say something flippant like, oh, well, go electric. Okay. Number one, electric heat, like baseboard heat, is unaffordable for many Canadians. Number two, even if we all did that tomorrow, we don't have the juice in the system to do that and charge our electric vehicles that they want us all to be driving. We just don't have that infrastructure in the grid. So what they're suggesting is impossible at this point for most people. And a reminder again, this is shocking. More than 40% of Canadians are within $200 every month of not being able to pay all their bills. They report this all the time. So they're getting close to insolvency. They're teetering right there. So when the Prime Minister goes back on his word and jacks up the carbon tax to this height, a lot of people aren't going to be able to afford this, and we're going to see a repeat of what happened in Ontario when the then Kathleen Wynne and Dalton McGuinty Liberal government brought in their ridiculous green energy scheme and way overpaid for renewables as wind and solar that people weren't even using. They then turned around and charged Hydro Ontario customers for power they weren't using, and they couldn't afford it. People's hydro bills skyrocketed. They could not afford it. And so it became a term called energy poverty. So much so that the Food Bank of Ontario was reporting record numbers, and they were saying that people were making the choice between heat and eat. We risk seeing that on a national scale if we keep doing this.
What can Canadians do about it?
Pick up the phone, pick up your email, and talk to your member of parliament. It doesn't matter which party they're in. If they get enough phone calls and enough emails saying, hey, we can't afford this, I'm looking at my heat bill, and I can't afford $40, $50, $60 a month, and I sure as heck can't afford, close to $400 in about 9 years or so just to not freeze to death. You need to tell the Prime Minister to stop this. You will hopefully get some traction. We've got 2 petitions up on our website, one for the first carbon tax and one for the second carbon tax. Some folks don't realize that there's a second one coming in federally. That one so far doesn't apply to natural gas and propane yet, but it does apply to furnace oil. So if you're heating your home with furnace oil, you're already paying the first carbon tax federally. You're going to be hit with another one very, very soon, like within the next year.
We'll have more with Kris Sims right after this.
Avon Resources Limited is a gold exploration company with significant projects in British Columbia and the Yukon, trading on the TSX Venture Exchange, symbol ABN, and the OTCQB, symbol ABNAF. Surrounded by world-class gold deposits and mines, Avon's 23,000 hectares Forest Kerr Gold Project is located in the heart of the Golden Triangle in northwestern BC. For more information, visit us at avonresources.com.
Welcome back. We're speaking with Kris Sims. Kris, Canada hasn't had a federal budget for 2 years, and they keep putting it back further and further. How serious is this?
This is very serious, and it's starting to get to the point where you're worrying why they're not coming up with a budget, because you're worrying if they're covering up something really bad or they're reluctant to show you. It's like, when your kid doesn't do well on the report card and it suddenly is at the bottom of their backpack and you can't find it for weeks. This is what it's starting to feel like here. We need to put a point on this. Every provincial government, this is not a partisan thing, every provincial government from, all walks of life, NDP government here in BC, the Conservative government in Alberta, all across Canada, you name it, they've all done budgets. They've all managed to do this. We know it's hard. Budgets are difficult. There's a lot of math and a lot of tabulation that goes into that. You need to speak with stakeholders. You need to have all your numbers right. It's a big, deep dive. But the feds need to get with it. We're the only country in the G7 that hasn't come up with a federal budget document. The last one we had was in 2019. That's just unacceptable for a country like Canada and with our economy. So we need to know where we're at. We know it's going to be dripping in red ink. We know, for example, that our federal debt is already over $1 trillion. We know that they're wasting money on dumb things and that they're also having to pay to help people through the COVID problem. We get it, but they need to put it in black and white. They need to put it down on paper so we can all analyze it and get a roadmap. It's better to have a plan.
Well, we know the patient has cancer, but they won't tell us how bad and if there's a cure.
Exactly. Do the scan. I know it's awful to take a look at it, but you got to scan the patient to see where you're looking at here. And they're just not doing it. At first, we thought that it was going to be coming out in a couple weeks. And then we just heard word from the press gallery in Ottawa that, they're kicking the can again. So sometime this spring is when we last heard. But man, it's getting on here. Again, last one we had was March of 2019. That's kind of mind-boggling to think. And so we're all kind of bracing ourselves for a lot of bad news when it comes to spending here. But if we don't see it and don't have the data, you're just running willy-nilly. That's like not knowing how much you're spending on groceries every time you go to the grocery store every week. Imagine just throwing your money at them or your credit card or something and turning around and covering your eyes when you see the till. That's no way to run a railroad. We got to figure this out.
Well, do you think it's political? March is usually the end and start of fiscal year, so that's why budgets are traditional in March. But in this case, also parliamentary procedure says that voting on a budget is a matter of confidence, and if the other parties with a minority government vote against the budget, Trudeau would have to call an election, or technically the governor general, who doesn't exist right now, would have to call a general election.
That could be playing a factor, and it's a good point. But at the end of the day, they need to show their math homework. The country needs it. And so they need to do this, soon. And so, hey, we were expecting him to come out with a budget, the Prime Minister to come out with a budget and announce all sorts of goodies, bells and whistles and, money for you, boutique tax credit here, all that fun stuff. And then, sure, quite typically would probably call an election because, as you said, it is a money bill. That's a confidence vote. But why is he dragging his feet now? We need this data in order to make the government run, in order to function as a country. And so they really got to get on this.
Well, maybe Chrystia Freeland, the finance minister's got just too much on her plate. She's also the deputy prime minister and is always tasked with everything. It seems like whenever Trudeau needs something done, he gives it to Chrystia, who, by the way, was born in my hometown of Peace River.
Oh, isn't that neat?
Yeah.
I didn't realize that.
Well, of course.
Well, she actually answers, I watch Question Period whenever I can manage it. She answers the bulk of the questions in Question Period, too.
Yeah.
So it's kind of a one-woman show going on over there, and we get it. But to be fair, she has tons of staff, and the finance department is replete with bureaucrats who have been there, through several political administrations. So they usually know what they're doing, pretty good at bean counting, they're pretty good at doing their tables and showing their calculations. Get her done. We need that document.
Now, I know, of course, you hate excessive taxation and the waste of taxpayer money, but there was that report from the Panama Papers. There's something like several Canadian billionaires who owe something like $55 billion in taxes. Our government is the only one in the G7 who has not made a concerted effort to go after these people and have them pay money that they owe duly and legally.
And it's weird. Why not?
They'll go after that waitress who didn't declare $200 in tips.
Exactly. Or they'll try to shake down some girl that works at a clothing store because she gets 50% off discount on her black pants that she has to wear at work and call that a taxable benefit. Or somebody who has to drive to work as a tradesman, they're going to now start charging that person for as a taxable benefit for the luxury of driving, 8 hours up to Prince George from here. I mean, it's mind-boggling. They'll go after them, Doug and Mary Canadian, but they won't go after somebody who's, smuggling away millions and billions. At the end of the day, if we had a wealth tax, for example, here in Canada, we did the calculations and it was shocking. At the rate Trudeau is spending, even if he put forward a wealth tax very similar to what the NDP is suggesting, he would spend that in 5 days. 5 days. It would be gone. Poof. It's like, okay, great idea. What are you going to do for the other, 51 and a half weeks of the year? You got to figure that out too. But yeah, it's a real head scratcher as to why they're not going after folks who are hiding money away that way. They have enough people at Revenue Canada. Why don't they start looking over there?
Also, another thing at Revenue Canada notices to people out of nowhere that all of a sudden your account with Revenue Canada is canceled, and they haven't given any alternatives yet, and we're in the middle of tax season.
Yep, tax season, and people still trying to get benefits, and people still losing their jobs, and so they need to be able to have some sort of an account set up. So yeah, it's definitely taking its toll. Part of this could be because so many people, including bureaucrats, are still working from home. I still have a lot of friends who work in Ottawa, and they say that, you could practically have a picnic on the street in the middle of Laurier Avenue. It's so quiet, or on Wellington in front of Parliament Hill, because so many office workers are working from home. It feels like a Sunday morning every day. So that's probably part of it, because a lot of those documents, especially with something as sensitive as Revenue Canada, they're kept under lock and key. You have to have a special computer passcode. It's not something people can do usually in their pajamas from their laptop, or at least it shouldn't be. So that's probably a factor here, but man, we're not new at this now. We've been at it, unfortunately, for a year. So they need to have their playbook a bit better. We're also concerned that this could turn into one of those Phoenix pay system problems, which they're still having so much problems with, and that's just a basic payroll software. So yeah, it's tough right now, but we're hopefully seeing light at the end of the tunnel as more people get vaccinated. Hopefully we'll be able to get back on track soon.
We'll have more with Kris Sims right after this.
Engineer Gold Mines is focused on the exploration and development of the historic high-grade Engineer Gold Mine situated 32 kilometers southwest of Atlan, British Columbia. Engineer Gold Mines is fully permitted for surface and underground exploration with the drill program now underway. Engineer Gold Mines Limited trades on the TSX Venture Exchange, symbol EAU.
For more information, please visit us at engineergoldmines.com.
Don't miss out. Stay informed. Receive the HowStreet.com weekly recap with thought-provoking podcasts, radio, and articles delivered to your inbox. Sign up for the HowStreet.com weekly recap on our homepage at HowStreet.com.
Welcome back. We're speaking with Kris Sims. Kris, the BC Supreme Court has ruled ICBC, the Public Car Insurance Corporation in British Columbia, the monopoly that every car driver has to subscribe to, their move to no-fault insurance, where your injuries and compensation will be prescribed by a 3-person tribunal, has been declared unconstitutional in part by a BC Supreme Court judge. Is BC's move to fault-free insurance without a lot of thought and forethought and foresight and research, is it premature? And what are the pitfalls where you don't get compensation for being injured? Instead, they just want to say, here's your $700, go away and learn how to walk on one leg.
Yeah, great point. So we clearly want competition. We don't want the monopoly that's controlled by the government. We think it's just fundamentally unfair. And add to it, it's one of the most expensive in Canada. Last we checked, it's still the most expensive. And so it's just completely wrong for us to be locked into this. Further to that, the changes that they've now made, we do hear from people quite frequently here at the Taxpayers Federation who are really concerned about it, that if, God forbid, they get into an accident and they're injured, that they won't be heard anymore, that they won't be able to have their day in court, so to speak, that they won't be able to describe their own injuries, their own pain and suffering, and they're worried that a government bureaucrat or a tribunal in this case will simply decide how injured they are, case closed, that's it, done. So it's very interesting that this has now been declared unconstitutional. Unfortunately, taxpayers' money is now going to be spent, as I'm sure the province is going to try to appeal it somehow. So the system is being confronted in this way. And yeah, we do hear from people who say, well, what happens if I'm more injured than the government says, so what are my alternatives? And that's where things get itchy, because people should always have a choice. They should be able to speak for themselves. They should be able to hire representation if they want to. That's where you get into more accountability within government. And so just telling them that one size fits all, go away, that's where things get really dicey.
ICBC claims you'll be paying 20% less on average with a no-fault system. Is it still too expensive for the average family?
It is, because if we do an apples to apples comparison with Alberta, we're quite often paying hundreds of dollars more per year than the same driver with the same record and the same car is in Alberta. And that, of course, is because if you get ticked off with your insurance provider in Alberta, you can shop around. You can say, forget this, I'm going somewhere else. And you can also bundle your insurance there. So if you have a quad or a motorbike or a camper, something like that, or even home insurance, content insurance if you're a renter, you can combine that with your auto insurance. You can get lower rates. It's neat. It's like shopping for groceries or shopping for electronics. You can price compare, you can price match, all that fun stuff. Here, it's just one stop, not shopping. And so while it's good to see any sort of reductions in the rates, because that's almost a form of tax for people, because most people have their vehicles as essential services, and being locked into it is unfair, we're happy to see reductions, but we don't know how long they're going to last. And they're also probably still going to be higher than other provinces where people can shop around.
Kris, where can people go if they want more information about the Taxpayers Federation?
We would love a visit to our website. It's taxpayer.com. You can read the history about us there. We were founded back in 1990. I like to say before the internet was invented and was a thing, but that makes them all laugh at me. We're a grassroots organization. It was founded by the Alberta Ratepayers Association and the Saskatchewan Ratepayers Association, both of whom were actually ticked off at conservative provincial and federal governments at the time. A lot of folks didn't want the GST, things like that, and they stuck around, and we became a national taxpayers federation. And so we have tips on how to write a really strong letter to your MLA or your MP, and a way to make a really good, firm, respectful phone call, and how to be a really good activist for change and actually affect good change. So we would love a visit to our website.
Kris, thank you so much for being on the Goddard Report.
Thank you for caring.
My guest has been Kris Sims, BC Director of the Canadian Taxpayers Federation. If you have any questions for Kris, they can email you where?
K-Sims, so the letter K, S-I-M-S, at taxpayer.com. And yes, if you want to send me your heating bill, I would love to look at another one, so just send it my way.
You're a sucker for punishment.
I am.
Or you can send any questions for Kris to info@howstreet.com, and we'll ask that question for you. Our YouTube channel is Talk Digital Network. Find us on Twitter at Talk Digital Net. We're also on Facebook. I'm Jim Goddard. Thank you for listening.
Comments made on the Goddard Report and TalkDigitalNetwork.com are an expression of opinion only. The Goddard Report is available online and mobile at TalkDigitalNetwork.com. The Goddard Report is a production of Howe Street Media Incorporated.